All right, Facebook, welcome back. Reason I'm laughing because we just had a nice scholarly discussion here. A little back and forth. Y'all should join us. We have a good time. All right. All right, let's pray. Father, we thank you so much in Jesus' name for your word. We thank you, Father God, for leading us and guiding us by your Spirit into all of your truth. Lord, as David said, we ask you again, show us your ways, teach us your paths, lead and guide us into your truth, and teach us because you are the God of our salvation. We look to you, we depend upon you all day. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, glad to be back. Oh, so glad to be back. All right, open your Bibles, please, to Proverbs, the 25th chapter. I want you to go to. Is it Proverbs 25? No, Proverbs chapter 16. Proverbs chapter 16. We're going to look at Proverbs chapter 16. Proverbs, and we've been talking about living successfully, living wisely in 2024 and beyond, or we could just simply say living successfully. And recently did this because the last time I was here, which has been a few weeks now because of being sick, but we were looking at the fact that when it comes to a new year, we tend to set New Year's goals, New Year resolutions. And we began to examine and really look at and study that the Bible does call us to what I call living successfully. Not living for success, but living successfully. And we said that to live successfully really means to flourish. And to flourish means that you become more. Living successfully is about you becoming more. It's what I call intrapersonal success, so that we become more as people, we become more as human beings, we become more as children of God, we grow, we develop, and as we do that, the world around us that we touch, that we influence, it will flourish also. As we flourish, the world around us that we touch, that we can influence, flourishes also. It becomes more. Living successfully is about becoming more, and as you become more, the world around you that you touch, that you influence, it becomes more also. We have said that to live successfully, you must live wisely. It means you have to develop certain skills. And we've been talking about what those skills are in order to flourish in life. One of the skills that we began talking about the last time I was with you is that one of the skills we have to develop is to learn to live emotionally intelligently. We have to be emotionally intelligent. In Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 32, it says, "He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city." Now, if you hold your place there and go over to Proverbs chapter 25, Proverbs chapter 25, it says something similar, though a little bit different. Proverbs 25 and verse 28, Proverbs 25 verse 28 says, "Whoever has no rule over his own spirit is like a city broken down without walls." Within the context here about ruling your own spirit, it's talking about having control, having mastery, exercising control over your emotions. What we would call today emotional intelligence. As a matter of fact, Dr. Tremper Longman, in his book, How to Read Proverbs, he states that wisdom, as it is spoken of in the book of Proverbs, is similar to the concept known as emotional intelligence. Let me read to you again. I've quoted from it before, his book, How to Read Proverbs. This is page 15. And Dr. Tremper Longman says that biblical wisdom is much closer to the idea of emotional intelligence. So one of the aspects of biblical wisdom is learning to exercise emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, one of the ways it can be defined, one of the terms I like to use is emotional success. In terms of the business that I do outside of the ministry, I call myself an emotional success coach. Emotional success is knowing how to get your emotions, is knowing how to get emotions to work for you rather than against you. Most of the time we think of our emotions, or we experience our emotions, as getting in our way. You know, they get in our way of achieving goals. We don't feel like achieving a goal one day, and then one day we do feel like it. Or we are afraid to take action. We are afraid of failure. And we feel these things, and sometimes we feel like they get in the way. Emotional intelligence is really having the skill. It's really applying intelligence to your emotions. It's being intelligent about your emotions, or wise where your emotions are concerned, so you get emotions to work for you rather than against you. It's knowing how to identify and cultivate the right emotions and use them on purpose when you need them. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. I've been studying this for 30 years. So in talking about this, we start looking at what are the emotions we need to cultivate in order to really flourish. One of them that we've already talked about is joy. We've got to cultivate more joy in our lives. I think that is so important. We did a whole thing on this. You can go back and find the video on that on our YouTube channel. Actually, they should be up there tomorrow because I was sick. I didn't upload them, but they will be uploaded by tomorrow. But we have to experience joy. Joy enables you to function optimally. We actually know this scientifically. When you experience states of joy, it causes your whole system to function optimally. You're actually able to do more with less energy. As I like to say, joy makes everything easier. All right. So joy is one of the emotions and emotional states and dispositions that we want to be able to cultivate and nurture in our lives. Another emotional state that we want to cultivate and manage is our motivation. That's what we're going to talk about tonight, how to create and maintain motivation. How do you motivate yourself? How do you keep yourself motivated in order to take consistent and persistent action? This is an aspect of emotional intelligence. As a matter of fact, Tremper Longman again, and he has a quote in here from Daniel Goldman, and he says that people with emotional intelligence have other abilities, quote, such as being able to motivate oneself and persist in the face of frustration. So one of the keys, or one of the aspects of emotional intelligence is being able to motivate yourself and to stay persistent in the face of frustration, in the face of discouragement. And it's a really key skill to learn. It's an important skill to learn. Why is motivation so important? Well, it's because we can look at it in this way. Action is what causes flourishing. If we want to flourish, you've got to take action. Turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 28. For those of you that are here and those of you who are watching, turn in your Bibles to Deuteronomy chapter 28. Deuteronomy chapter 28. And we're just going to look at two verses. I want to show you something. Deuteronomy 28. We'll look at several verses in just a moment. Deuteronomy 28 verses 1 and 2. God speaking through Moses says to the people of Israel, "Now it shall come to pass, if you diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments, which I command you today, that the Lord your God will set you on high above all nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you, because you obey the voice of the Lord your God." So notice here in verse 1 and 2, doing God's will leads to blessing, which is flourishing. It's life. As Israel is obedient, as they do God's will, it results in flourishing. Let's look at Psalms. Actually, go over to Joshua chapter 1. I didn't put this in your notes, but you can jot that down. Joshua chapter 1. Just establishing a kind of a foundation here for what we're talking about. Joshua chapter 1 and verse 8. Excuse me. Joshua 1 verse 8. God speaking to Joshua. And I always love Joshua 1:8 for this very reason. It is God telling Joshua this. It's not an angel. It's not an intermediate person. It's not a prophet. It's God saying to Joshua in verse 8, "This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success." What I just want to bring out of this is notice, and by the way, we're going to be talking about biblical meditation as another important part of flourishing in life. But notice in verse 8, God tells Joshua, "This book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth. You are to meditate on it day and night, so that you may observe to do all that is written in it." Because when you observe to do it, then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success, or you will deal wisely. You will live wisely. So Joshua's prospering. In past, I grew up within a certain community of faith. Rick knows what I'm talking about, where we were taught, well, if you meditate on the word, you'll prosper. That's not what the verse says. The verse says, if you meditate upon the Torah, they had to keep their covenant with God, you will do it, and then as you do it, then you will make your way prosperous, then you will have good success. So action was important for Joshua to flourish. One more verse, look at, actually two more verses. We'll go to Psalms 1. Psalms 1. The idea here again is that action is necessary for flourishing. In Psalms 1 and we'll start at verse 1. It says, "Blessed is the man," Psalms 1 verse 1, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that brings forth its fruit in its season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he does shall prosper. So once again, we see here, he must do. Prospering is a result of, he's meditating on the word. Again, going back to Joshua chapter 1, verse 8, this person is meditating on the word, and it says this person is blessed. The Hebrew word here for blessed, it's not the same one that's in Deuteronomy chapter 28 that we first read. That word there was barak. This word here in Psalms 1 is ashrei. My daughter Olivia's middle name is Ashrei. But it can mean it's translated as blessed. We're going to talk about just a minute how this word relates to flourishing. But notice this person, as they do, they prosper. All right. One more verse. Go to James chapter 1. James chapter 1. We're going to go over to the New Testament. James chapter 1. And we're going to look at verse 22. Verse scripture you're probably all familiar with. James chapter 1, verse 22. Excuse me. James says, but be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man observing his natural face in a mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. But he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the word, this one, notice, this one will be blessed in what he does. Okay? So again, over and over, we see this connection of being blessed, of doing and being blessed. Now, the word here for, the word here for blessed, when it says here in verse 25, he shall be blessed in what he does, is the Greek term makarios. That's the Greek word. This is the word Jesus usually says in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are they who. The Hebrew equivalent of makarios is the Hebrew word ashrei, which we just read in Psalms 1. Ashrei. Now, so in other words, if you were to take the Hebrew Bible and translate it into Greek, okay, which has been done, the Septuagint, Psalms 1, rather than saying ashrei, it would say makarios. Okay, because the term, that's the word that they picked. Now, why is that important? Well, according to a scholar by the name of Dr. Jonathan Pennington, who wrote a book called The Sermon on the Mount and Human Flourishing, which I highly recommend. It's a wonderful book, one of my favorites. He says that ashrei, the Hebrew term, describes the happy state of one who lives wisely. Ashrei describes the happy state of one who lives wisely. Makarios, he says, refers to, in the same book, refers to human flourishing or fullness of earthly life. So in other words, when James says here, to be a doer of the word, you will be blessed in your deed, James is telling us that the one who is a doer of God's word will flourish through their actions. They will live successfully. They will become more. And as they become more, they influence and touch the world around them so that the world around them can become more. Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, really, when you look at it and you study it, it's all about flourishing and causing others to flourish. But you can only really cause others to flourish as you flourish yourself. There seems to be this pattern in Scripture, and I like to encapsulate this pattern in a saying, as you are, so your world will be. Over and over we see this, that whatever man becomes, good or bad, affects the environment around him. So as we grow, as we develop, as we become more, the world around us become more. As a matter of fact, you can almost say to a certain degree, if you're looking at your life and you're not satisfied, go like, why is this like this still? I've done this. Usually the answer is, I need to become more. I need to learn more. I need to grow. I need to develop my skill set. As I do that, then I begin to affect the environment around me. I am able to help people around me. I work as a coach. I didn't work as a coach 35 years ago. I knew nothing about coaching 35 years ago. 35 years. No. But I have now been able to positively impact the lives of other people because as I have grown, My skills as a coach, I've helped people in their marriages. I've helped people overcome fears and anxieties and depression. I've helped people in a lot of different ways get unstuck and move forward in their goals. And that's because I grew as a person. So as I grew, I was able to impact the world around me. Does that make sense? So as we grow, as we develop, as we take action, we flourish. So taking action is so very important. And this is why motivation, because doing, acting, and behaving consistently and wisely, it is a key to flourishing. And we need motivation to do that. We need motivation in order to take consistent action. Whether it's acting on God's word, guess what? You need motivation to act on God's word. Now, let's first of all talk about what is motivation. If we look at it, Oxford Language Online Dictionary defines motivation as the reason or reasons that one has for acting or behaving in a particular way. It also defines it as the general desire or willingness of someone to do something. Your general desire or willingness, your reasons for doing something. That's motivation. Wikipedia had a great definition of motivation I really like. An internal state that propels individuals to engage in goal-directed behavior. Okay? So if you find yourself doing things consistently, it's usually because you have some reasons. There is some sort of internal state that moves you to do that. If we are not doing something, usually it's because we don't have the motivation to take action. Okay? But in order to take consistent action, we have to be motivated. Now, one of the things I've noticed over the past few years, because I live in this world, this arena where it deals a lot with motivation, self-help, mindset, people that I work with, friends of mine, I started noticing people start saying, motivation is a big hype. You don't need motivation. What you really need, they would say, is habit. You need to develop habit. It's not motivation so much you need, but it's habit. Because they would say, motivation is temporary, it doesn't last. And when I first started hearing that, I went, that's wrong. You do need motivation. But they would say, motivation doesn't last. So I like something that Zig Ziglar once said. I heard him say this years ago. He says, people often say, motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing, which is why we recommend it daily. Okay. It's the same with motivation. When I started really listening to what people were saying about motivation, what I noticed is that they were talking about waiting to be motivated. People waiting to be motivated, being passive where their motivation is concerned, waiting to feel better before they would take action. First of all, let me say, not all motivation has to do with good feelings, as we're going to see in a few moments. Not all motivation has to do with good feelings. You could be motivated by other feelings other than positive feelings. Okay? But usually when people talk about being motivation doesn't last, you can't wait around. I've heard people say you just can't wait until you feel better. Or they'll say you cannot feel your way into a behavior or feel your way into action, which I would go, yeah, you can. You just got to know how. I've been studying this for 30 years. Yes, you can feel your way into a behavior. But what they were talking about was, by the way, when they would say that, they would say, just take action and the motivation will come. I go, yeah, you can do that, but then you have to ask the question, if you're taking action, what's motivating you to take the action? So I don't feel motivated, just take action. But in order to take action, you got to feel motivated. There's something motivating you. Okay? But you can still make yourself doing something. By the way, a feeling is still involved. Even if you make yourself do something, there's a feeling involved. But you can make yourself do something. And I've said to people, yeah, it's possible. It's really hard when you really don't want to do something. It's really hard to keep that going. So the more I started to look at this, I realized people were talking about waiting to be motivated, being passive, waiting for inspiration to hit them. Just to give you a look, I remember when I was younger, back in my early 20s, when Karen and I first started pastoring, we had our first church. And back then, I would wait for inspiration to hit me to write a message. And did you ever do that, Rick? You're just waiting. It's like you wait for that anointing to come. You're waiting for that unction to hit you. And if it didn't hit you, I'd start to panic. If it didn't hit me, I'd be up all night. And I was like, okay, Lord, I gotta do a message tomorrow. And I'm just waiting for something to hit me, some idea. And I would wait and I would wait and I would panic. Because sometimes I'd be like, nothing's happening. And I'd be up all night. It got to the point sometimes I almost dreaded having to do my message for we're meeting on Sundays, because it's like, and finally something, I always think to myself, God will look down and go, I'm going to have some mercy on this boy because he going to drive himself crazy. I used to do that, wait for motivation. I don't wait for motivation now. I study, I do my homework, and it is not always that I feel like writing a message or putting all my thoughts down, but if I don't feel like it, I get myself to feel like it. I've learned to motivate myself. So what I'm talking about is not waiting for inspiration, waiting for motivation, waiting for the feeling, but again, emotional intelligence, emotional success is about getting your emotions to work for you rather than against you. One of the things I say over and over when it comes to emotions, that we as human beings have a lot more choice about our emotional states and our emotional well-being than we realize. But this is where it takes wisdom. We have to know how. Okay? Look at Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. And we're going to look at verse 11. Romans chapter 12, verse 11. Probably heard of this passage before. Am I making sense so far, by the way? Romans 12:11 says, Paul says, not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. We are not to be lagging in spirit. We're not to be lagging in diligence, in my New King James, but we are to be fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. So we're told to be fervent in spirit. Now, we're not really sure, if you look in the Greek, is this talking about being fervent in the Holy Spirit or being just fervent in your spirit? We're not really sure. Some scholars says this is a fervency that's created by the Spirit. Other scholars says, one of the things that's definitely is sure is that there is a connection to the Spirit of God, because this is where a source of our motivation comes from, as we'll see in a moment. God is the one, he motivates us. But fervency of spirit can also just refer to being passionate. The word fervent in Greek means to boil over with passion. It can mean love or zeal for what is good or bad. So it means to be passionate. This is an emotional term. So we're to be passionate and motivated about serving God. And really everything we do should be as unto the Lord, which means that we are to live life passionately. We're to live life with zeal. We're to be fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. In other words, we're to be motivated. And God is a source for that. Look at Philippians chapter 2, one of my favorite passages of Scripture. Philippians chapter 2. And we're going to look at verse 12. Philippians chapter 2, verse 12. This verse of Scripture for me is a basis for being able to live what we sometimes refer to as a victorious Christian life. This is one of the scriptures for me that says this is why we can do it. Philippians chapter 2, verse 12 says, therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Verse 13, for it is God who works in you both to will and to do for his good pleasure. God is working in us. Literally, God is energizing us. He is empowering us both to will, and that word there, will, can refer not only to your will in terms of volition, but it also speaks of decision that springs out of emotion or desire or pleasure. God works in us a willingness. Remember we said that motivation is a willingness to do something? God works in us the desire. In fact, one translation says God works in us both the power and the desire to will and to work for his good pleasure. He energizes us. He is working within us the desire to do his will. The reason you and I desire to do his will is because he is within us, all of us, working and energizing us to do his will. I know, and probably many of you, those of you watching on Facebook, when I first got saved, you notice you had a desire to do the things of God. It's like nobody had to really tell you. It's like all of a sudden it was like, I want to obey God. I was telling someone not too long ago, I was listening to a podcast I was on recently, and I was saying that when I got saved, immediately I had a desire to read my Bible. No one ever told me you need to read your Bible. There was an instant desire and a hunger. I stayed in the book of Matthew for months. I don't know why I was so attracted to Matthew, but I just kept reading Matthew over and over and over. No one ever told me to do it. Where did that come from? That came from God working in me both to will and to do. So the reason you and I can live out what it means to be saved is because God is working within us the power and the desire to do his will. He's working in us 24/7 to do his will. That's good news. That we are consistently empowered and energized by him to do his will. This is also the reason we can be fervent in spirit. The question is how do we cooperate with God in maintaining our motivation and living wisely so that we can live successfully? How do we maintain the motivation? Remember Romans chapter 12 verse 11 says, be fervent in spirit. When it says that, the word fervent in the Greek is in what we call the active voice, meaning the subject of the sentence is the one who performs the action. Meaning we have to also, God works in us, but we got to work with God to maintain that fervency. So there is something we need to do. And that's what I want to talk about for the rest of this evening. How do we cultivate and maintain motivation in our lives? How do we cooperate with God in maintaining our motivation so that we can live wisely, live according to his will, apply what we are learning? Because I can say this, one of the biggest things that I've seen that keeps people from flourishing is that they don't take action. They don't follow instruction. They don't follow instruction. And sometimes they don't follow instruction because they lack, for whatever reason, the motivation. I've had people literally come to me. I remember one time working with a client. I was working with this guy, and he goes, I said, well, how did the week go? Did you apply this? How's it going? And he goes, it just didn't work. It just didn't work. And I said, it did. He goes, yeah, some things are just easier said than done, Mike. They're just easier said than done. I said, okay, well, show me what you did. And then he said this to me. Well, I didn't do anything. And I've had clients tell me that, where I go, show me, because they'll go, oh, it was just too hard. I go, well, what did you do? Why didn't you do anything? I think I see what your problem is. You can't prosper, you can't flourish if you don't take action. It is the number one thing that I see keeping Christians back from flourishing is that they don't take action. We can't live successfully if we don't act consistently. And consistent is an important term because if we're not consistent, if we're sometimey, we won't get the results that we want. So we've got to act consistently. So one of the things we want to look at is how do we maintain consistent motivation? Because as people have said, well, motivation is temporary, so you got to develop habits. Now, it is true that if you are consistent in your motivation, that will develop a habit, and then the habit will keep you going. But you want to know how to tap into your motivation on purpose. So I'm going to share with you 2 strategies for tapping in motivation. I utilize this in my own life on a regular basis. I utilize this with clients. There's a lot of different strategies I could show you, and I thought about it, what's the simplest ones I can show them that I know really work? Okay. So this first strategy is we're going to talk about some principles, and we're going to talk about what I call the motivating factors of life. As I said, there's different ways to approaching motivation. We're going to look at a really simple principle. And the principle is what I call the pain-pleasure principle. The pain-pleasure principle. And the pain-pleasure principle basically says this. As human beings, God has made us so that we are motivated by 2 factors. One is pain, the other one is pleasure. We are motivated by pain and pleasure. The principle of pain and pleasure also states that we move away from what is painful or what we perceive or think is painful, and we move towards what is pleasurable or what we think or perceive as pleasurable. That is the basic principle or principles behind the pain-pleasure principle. The basic concept of it is that we move away from and it's the way God has made us. This is how we are made physiologically. We are made to move towards both psychologically and physiologically, meaning in terms of how our nervous system works, we are made to move towards what is pleasurable. We move away from what is painful. We can see this like when you were a kid and you touch something hot. Or if you think something is going to be hot, what's the first thing we do? We move away. We jerk our hand back. Why? Because we think it's going to be painful, so we move away from it. Physiologically, that's the way that we are made. If something we think is pleasurable, if there's a certain food that we like, we move towards it, right? I like it. Even if you're told, you can't eat this anymore, but I like it. And by the way, this is why it's difficult to stop eating something. It's because of the pleasure. We attach pleasure to it, and we attach pain to not eating it. Okay? And keep in mind, you move towards what's pleasurable, you move away from what is painful. So if there's a certain food, like there's certain things I can't eat, that when I mean can't, I'm not supposed to eat because of the impact that it can have upon my health. Especially, you start getting older, you find out, okay, I can't eat that. Or it's like, my brothers and I were talking about this one time. It's like, when did we get to the point we go like, oh no, it's past 7. I can't have that. And the reason why is because I know that if I eat certain things after 7, it's going to affect me through the night. It's going to affect me in the morning. That's pain. So I won't do it because I don't want the uncomfortable feeling. There's a lot of different terms that we could put under pain and pleasure, but they all relate to that there are some feelings, there are some emotions, there are some sensations that are pleasurable, there are some feelings, some emotions, some sensations that are painful. And so we have a food that we know we're not supposed to eat. The reason we eat it is because, even though we're told, don't do this, is because we find it pleasurable. And the idea of not eating it, we experience pain in some form or fashion. Not necessarily physical pain. It can just be uncomfortable. Like, I want it. We don't like that uncomfortable feeling, which is pain. So we go eat it. This is what you have to manage. Part of managing your motivation is it's managing what you associate pain and pleasure to. Part of managing your motivation is managing what you associate pain and pleasure to. So we're going to talk about how to do that. I'm not just going to leave you hanging. So we see this principle of pain and pleasure at work within the scriptures. Go back to Deuteronomy chapter 28. Go back to Deuteronomy chapter 28. And let's see, where we're at. Okay, here we go. Deuteronomy 28. And we read there earlier what God was saying through Moses to the people of Israel. Deuteronomy 28. Now it shall come to pass, if you diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments, which I command you today, that the Lord your God will set you on high above all nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you, because you obey the voice of the Lord your God. Now, notice here, God says, if you obey, you will be blessed. Notice what he says in verse 15. Verse 15. But it shall come to pass, if you do not obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments and his statutes, which I command you today, that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. So in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 1 and 2 and verse 15, it speaks of blessing and cursing in regards to obeying and disobeying. Now, why does it do this? Okay, let me read to you from this little book called Reading Law. This is by a scholar named James Watts. It's called it's subtitled The Rhetorical Shaping of the Pentateuch. I bought this book a long time ago, a little small book. I remember it cost me $65 to buy this book, but I bought it because it had such great information in it. And this is what he says in this book about what we call blessing and cursing. He says, and I'm quoting here from page 27, he says, and I'll explain these terms in just a moment. In the dialectic of story and list, blessing and cursings may look, let me say that again. In the dialectic of story and list, blessings and curses may look like another form of list. Their rhetorical force of story and list, however, differs considerably from that produced. Let me back up. Their rhetorical force, speaking of blessing and cursing, however, differs considerably from that produced by list of laws, stipulations, or instructions. The latter, laws, stipulations, and instructions, address belief and behavior, whereas appeal to divine authorization and threats, blessing and cursings, aim at motivation. Now, he said, let me read this one more thing. The persuasive intent behind such text is undisguised in the blessing and cursings. So, let me explain what he's talking about here. He talks about that in ancient Near Eastern text, ancient Near Eastern treaties, covenants, as Aaron was talking about. Aaron didn't know I was going to talk about this. I didn't know he was going to talk about this. But in ancient Near Eastern treaties, covenants, you had 3 elements. And this is in your handout. You had history and story. You had list. And you have what scholars sometimes refer to as divine sanctions. Now, what's history and story? History and story was utilized to give inspiration or reasons why loyalty and obedience was expected. Let me give you an illustration because Aaron actually referred to it earlier, and I thought when he showed, I went, I'm going to use that tonight. Go over to Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20. Hold your place in Deuteronomy 28 because we're going to come back to it because I'm going to show you something in a moment. Matter of fact, let me find it and hold my place there. Go over to Exodus chapter 20. Let me find it. Let me get there with you real quick. I'm going to show you something. Within treaties in the ancient Near East, including Israel's, you had three elements that made up the treaty or the covenant. You had history or story, you had list, and then you had divine sanctions. Okay? History and story would give the people inspiration or give them reasons why they were expected to be loyal to their king, or in Israel's case, to God. So in Exodus chapter 20, it says, "And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage." See that verse? You know what that is? That's history. That's story. Now, technically speaking, the rest of the story is everything that precedes it. You have all of this story. There is a reason the Pentateuch is written in the way in which it is written. You have all of these stories. You have the story of creation. You have the story of the creation of the people of Israel. All of this story is for a reason, and it is written persuasively in order to persuade Israel, this is why you are to obey the Lord your God. So God starts off with story. I am the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Then he starts to say, you shall have no other gods before me. You should not make for yourself a carved image. The next commandment is you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. These are the list. These are the stipulations of what is to be obeyed. This shows how you are to demonstrate your loyalty. So the story gives you why you're to be loyal. The list gives you how you demonstrate the loyalty. But then you have divine sanctions. Now you have these in Exodus. You also have these throughout Deuteronomy and in Leviticus. The divine sanctions are the blessings and the curses. That's for the purpose of motivating behavior, according to what the scholars tell us. And this is what James Watts was saying in that kind of complicated message that I read to you that he said on page 47. It's throughout the book he talks about this. Let's see. Here it is. He says that the appeals to divine authorizations and threats, which are the blessings and curses, they aim at motivation. So the purpose of God laying down, and by the way, in the ancient Near East, in the treaties and covenants, they all did this. They all had blessings and cursings. When Aaron was talking about the Hittites, they had that in their treaties. I think the Amalekites had it in there, or the Assyrians had it in theirs. But it all was for the purpose of creating motivation. So you had inspiration to obey in terms of the story. This gives us the reason why we should obey. You had the list that tells us what to obey, but what provides the motivation? The blessing and the curses. Okay? Go back over to Deuteronomy chapter 28. So within Scripture, God is using blessing and cursing in order to motivate human action and behavior. In other words, God is utilizing the psychological and physiological principle of pain and pleasure in order to motivate human behavior. Now, if you go back to Deuteronomy chapter 28, and I noticed this years ago, if you notice verse 3 starts with the blessings, right? And it ends at verse 13. Starts at verse 3 and ends at verse 13. He takes about 10 verses to talk about the blessings. That's the pleasure. These are all the benefits you will get. These are all the blessings you will receive. These are all the joys that you will experience. And he talks about things like your basket and your kneading bowl shall be blessed. You'll be blessed when you come in and blessed when you go out. The Lord will cause your enemies that rise against you to be defeated before your face. They shall come against you one way and flee before you seven. He lays out all of these blessings all the way down to verse 13. 10 verses talking about the joys, the benefits, the pleasures. God is associating pleasure to obedience. Why? Because as human beings, we move towards what is pleasurable. So he associates pleasure to obedience. But then starting with verse 15, actually starting with verse 16, he begins to talk about the curses. And the curses go from verse 16 all the way down to verse, let me turn the page here, all the way down to verse 68. The curses are much longer, they are more detailed, they are more vivid, and they are more graphic. As a matter of fact, the curses are in Deuteronomy 28 are 4.5 times longer than the blessings. They're longer. Why is that? Okay, let me read to you from another book called The Pentateuch and Haftarahs, edited by J.E. Hertz. Had this book for a long time here. This is what he says when he looks at the blessings and curses in Deuteronomy, in Leviticus, because Leviticus has a very similar structure to Deuteronomy in terms of blessing and cursing. He says, he writes, why is it asked, does Scripture enter into such dreadful details concerning the consequences of disobedience? 2 observations must be made in regard to this form of appeal. The first is that it is a language which the people to whom this homiletic discourse on the wages of disobedience was originally addressed, they could clearly understand. They could clearly understand it. A wealth of bliss may be depicted in 2 or 3 concise phrases, but to cause the primitive mind to realize the awful consequences of sin and transgression, the words of denunciation must come swift and powerful, and hammer blows must become swift and powerful as hammer blows, and must picture to their last terrible results the dreadful devastation wrought by human perversity. In other words, we have to make disobedience to God really, really painful. We have to show this is really, really bad. You will not like the results. If you disobey God, if you are unloyal to him, if you depart from his ways, you will not like the results that you're going to get. He goes on to say, after having declared the higher law and rooted all human duty, both to God and man, in the holiness ideal, which is, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy, the lawgiver endeavors to enlist man's natural fear and hope as allies of that sublime principle. In startling and indeed in terrifying form, he contrasts the blessing in the event of faithfulness to God with the dire calamities if the people prove disloyal to him. So, the reason in Deuteronomy chapter 28 and in Leviticus chapter 26, you will see the curses are always longer, always more vivid, always more descriptive than the blessings. Here's the reason why, and this is a true scientific fact. As human beings, we will do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. It's the way we're set up physiologically. We will do more to gain pain. We will do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. Yes, we move towards pleasure, but we will do almost anything to gain pain. We'll do more to avoid the pain than we will to gain pleasure. Studies have been done where they've asked people, if you knew that going to work today, someone was going to break into your home and steal $5,000 worth of your stuff, but you also knew that going to work, you were going to make $5,000, would you go to work or would you stay home? Now, again, the idea is if you go to work, someone's going to break into your home, take $5,000 worth of your stuff. But if you go to work, you're going to make $5,000. So what would you do? The answer, as a rule, stay home. Because the pain of losing was greater than the pain of gaining. It's known as the endowment effect. Okay? I don't have time to go into this now. The endowment, E-N-D-O-W-M-E-N-T, the endowment effect. It's the idea that when we own something, we simply don't own it. We see it as part of ourselves. And so to lose something is to lose a part of yourself. That's why we don't want to give certain things up at times. It's like giving up part of myself. Like if you just come in, Mike, like Rick, go, Mike, can I have that book? No. Yeah. I will buy you a book. Yeah. But, yeah. But the thing about it is, as human beings, we will do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. This is why it is difficult for people, again, if they see something as pleasurable, to give it up is too painful. So they won't give it up because it's just too painful, because we will do more to avoid pain. So this is why we got to be careful, and we have to start being conscious about what we are associating pain and pleasure to. Because, and notice the way I said what we associate, we are the ones who associate pain and pleasure to things. Now, a lot of times we grow up and we're not aware that certain things get associated with pain and pleasure. But at some point we have to stop and we have to become more conscious and start to, on purpose, associate pleasure to the things that we want to move towards consistently, and associate pain to the things we want to avoid. Okay? So, again, God was utilizing this psychological and physiological principle as Hertz said, Jewish scholar, he said God wasn't enlisting man's natural aversion to things and enlisting his hope, the things that he desired, to move him towards obedience and away from disobedience. Okay? So God himself utilizes this principle. By the way, Satan also utilizes this principle. Remember the story of Adam and Eve? We won't go in there and look. It's one of my favorite things to look at, though. In Genesis chapter 2 and Genesis chapter 3, you see the pain-pleasure principle at work. In Genesis chapter 2, God makes every tree of the garden, right? He makes it beautiful. He makes it something that's desirable. He tells Adam, every tree of the garden you may partake of. There's one tree, stay away from. And what does he say to Adam? In the day that you eat thereof, you shall surely what? Die. That pain or pleasure? Pain. Every tree of the garden you may freely eat of. Pain or pleasure? Pleasure. Right? Satan comes, chapter 3, and says, did God really say you can't eat of any of the trees? And he says, no. He says, just the tree. We can eat of any tree of the garden, but the tree that's in the midst of the garden, we're not to eat of, and we're not even to touch. And lest we die. And Satan says this to her, you won't die. Notice what he does. He removes the consequence of the action. He removes the pain. You will not surely die. Then he adds more pain. God knows that the day you eat thereof, he has pain and pleasure. You shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. So on the one hand, God has been keeping something from you. But if you partake of this tree, you will gain. That's pleasure. So he removes the consequence, the pain, and he associates now pleasure to the tree that God said stay away from. And the Bible says when Eve looked at the tree and saw that it was a tree good for food and pleasures to the eyes and a tree to be desired to make one wise. Is that pain or pleasure? Pleasure. She partook of it. She moved towards it. Now you remember what Eve said, the serpent beguiled me and I did eat. He literally, the word is he mentally deluded me. How? He managed for her what was painful and what was pleasurable. He manipulated. Yeah. Now she was deluded. He deceived her, but it's using emotion, using desire, using pain and pleasure. Using pain and pleasure. He got her to dissociate pain from the tree that they were not to partake of and associate pleasure to it. Because we move towards what's pleasurable and we move away from what is painful. And that's what sin. Every man is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desire. Right. You know, Jesus even used this to motivate behavior. Turn over to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. This is a principle throughout Scripture. It was a principle that was known in the Greco-Roman world, but it definitely was known in the ancient Near Eastern world. Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. Am I making sense? Okay, Matthew chapter 5, then I'm going to show you two strategies. 5:43, Matthew 5, verse 43. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say unto you, and that's what Jesus wants them to do. Love your enemies. Now you can imagine everybody going, what? You want me to do what? Love my enemies? Love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Now, on the surface, is your enemy painful or pleasurable? Painful. I'm going to move away from you. I'm not moving towards you. I'm not going to pray for you. I'm not going to bless you. I'm not going to do good. How does Jesus motivate them? First, he says, love them, bless them, do good, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. That's the first point of pleasure. You'll be like God. He makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. So that's the pleasure. You're going to be like God. Here's the pain. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so? Now you have to understand, in the first century Jewish world, tax collectors who were Jewish were seen as traitors. They were absolutely despised by the Jewish people. Jesus is saying, look, if you only love those who love you, you're just like the tax collectors that you despise. This is masterful. This is persuasive speech. He said, if you only do good, if you only greet those that like, you're just like the people you despise. You're just like a tax collector. You can imagine people go, whoa, 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 Jesus. I'm not a traitor to my people. Well, you are if you only love those who love you back. He's using pain and pleasure. He said, but if you want to be like your Father in heaven, who is the most honorable, because this also has to do with honor, Jesus was talking about here, and honor was so important. And so if someone slaps you, that's an attack upon your honor. How does Jesus get them to move away, though, from this Greco-Roman behavior and attitudes that was pervasive at the time, and even among the Jewish people? He attaches pain to the wrong behavior. And he attaches pleasure to the right behavior. Be like your Father in heaven. Don't be like tax collectors. This principle is used, and you can see Jesus using it throughout his teaching. So, one of the things we want to learn to do is to utilize pain and pleasure. We want to be able to cultivate and utilize this in our own life. So, let me share with you real quick 2 strategies. One, I'm going to share with you what I call a short-term strategy. This is a strategy, and I use this with my clients to help them in the short term when they need to be motivated to do something they don't feel motivated. The idea, again, people often say, you cannot feel your way into action. I go, yes, you can if you know how. You just got to know how. You got to have wisdom, skill. This is a skill that anyone can use. And I'll be honest with you, this usually works 99% of the time. No exaggeration. Almost 100% of the time this works. I'll tell you why in a moment. Step 1, let's say there's something you don't want to do. Okay? You can think about anything. If we had more time, I would literally just walk everybody through so you can experience. But you kind of go through this in your mind. What you want to do is, first of all, identify what it is that you don't want to do. Okay? And you want to get that clear. What is it that I need to do that I'm not doing? And it can also be, as we're going to see in another strategy, something that maybe I'm doing that I need to stop doing. Okay? But especially if I need to get myself to take action. What is it? You identify that first. Step 2, identify what it will cost you. By the way, I call this the Deuteronomy 30:19 strategy. I'll tell you why in a second. Deuteronomy 30:19 says, I set before you life and death, blessing and cursing, therefore choose life. Now, this is how this works. Identify what I need to do. Then I identify what will it cost me? What will I lose if I don't take this action? What's going to cost me? And you want to identify and begin to imagine and say to yourself all the things you will lose, how it will negatively impact you if you don't take the action. What will it do if I don't take action? You can list this, you can write it down, or talk out loud to yourself about all the ways it will negatively impact you. Now, it's important that you just don't do it intellectually, that you actually feel it. How is this going to impact you? How is this going to impact you now? How is this going to impact you in a few hours? How is this going to impact you in the next few days if you don't take this action? So for me, if I'm doing this, like if I need to sit down, I need to write, take everything that I've been working on and write it, sit down and write it. And maybe what I want to do instead is watch videos on YouTube or go do something else. I'll go, if I don't sit down and write, and I'll do this out loud. If I don't sit down and write right now, what is this? How is this going to negatively impact me? What is it going to cost me? It's going to cost me time. I'm going to be behind. I'm going to have to stay up later. I'm not going to get enough sleep. That's going to make me grumpy the next day. I'm going to be behind on other projects. It's going to push some of my other projects further out by not getting this done now because I'm going to end up wasting too much time. So I'll start talking about all the ways it will negatively impact me. Okay? And then once I do that, I'll feel that, go like, ooh, okay. Now, once you identify that, you set that aside for just a moment. And then you do is, this is step 3, identify all the ways you will be blessed, all of the ways you will be positively impacted by taking action. What are all the ways you will be positively impacted? You're going to do the reverse. Imagine all the positive benefits from taking action. Okay, so how is this going to be? If I get this done right now, I'll save time. If I write it right now, I'll be able to have more time tomorrow to work on some other things that I want to work on. If I do it now, this is one of the things I'll often say, this will prove to me that these tools work and I can use them with other people and tell them that they actually work. Those are all positive benefits for me. And I will cite all the positive benefits that I can think of. What's important here is that you feel the joy and the pleasure of that. That you feel the positive benefits. Again, you don't just want to do it intellectually, you want to actually feel it and feel the joy, feel the pleasure of it. Okay? So you want to say that, you want to do, here we go. You want to feel the pleasure. Okay? So you have felt the negative impact. Now you feel the positive impact. What you want to do, this is step 4, is bring both of them before you. Both of the choices, not doing it, doing it. And this is real important. You ask yourself out loud, which one do I choose? Do I want the curses? Do I want the negative impact? Or do I want the positive benefits? And you state out loud on purpose which one you now choose. I have done this with clients over and over and over. I have never had a client choose the negative. Never. They always go, I want the positive. I go, okay, put the other one aside. You want the positive? You're going to do it? Yes. When are you going to do it? Take that action. I had a client one time, and by the way, when I do this in the Christian community, I call it the Deuteronomy 30:19 strategy. Because this is what Moses and God through Moses do with the people of Israel. Deuteronomy 28, he gives them the blessing and the curses. Deuteronomy chapter 30, he said, I have set before you blessing and curses, life and death. Now choose. He set it before them and he says, choose. What idiot would choose curses that are 4.5 times longer than the blessing? Nobody would. You would choose the blessing. Now, somebody may say, but at Israel at times, they would choose to disobey God. Why? Because they would forget. This is why God tells them over and over, remember. This is why God tells Joshua, this book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth, but you shall meditate what? Day and night. Keep before you not only the stipulations, but the blessings and the cursings. So you can always choose life. And like I said, I have never had anyone choose to do the opposite, to choose the negative. They've never done it. But if they were, I would know why. If someone was to choose the negative, it was because in some way, form, or fashion, they saw a positive in the negative. This is what's known sometimes in psychology as secondary gain. There's something that they're getting from it. And sometimes I have to check with people and go, what is this doing for you? Because the way we are made to avoid what's painful. And we are made to move towards what's pleasurable. But if you do this with yourself and you do it consistently in the moment, you will find yourself choosing to do the right thing. Sometimes you have to stop and do it again and go, wait, I'm getting distracted here because I've done this with myself. And I'll say out loud, Mike, what do you choose? Do you want to procrastinate and get behind and really be upset with yourself later? Or do you choose to take action now and get this done and be happy with yourself? And I go, and I'll say to myself, which one do you want? And I'll go, Mike, choose right now. And I go, I want the blessing. I want to choose life. And by the way, you can use those terms too. You could say, this is death. This is life. This is good for me. This is poison. Which one do I want? Now, if somebody says, well, I might end up choosing the poison, that means somehow or another you associated pleasure to the poison. So you need to tip and say, no, this is not, and let's say with food, right? What is this doing to my body? And the reason I say you have to do it consciously, most of the time we are making our decisions unconsciously. We're choosing, and we're not thinking about the consequences of where our choices are going to take us. But when I found, and this is how I discovered this one day, when I brought to my clients conscious awareness of their decisions, they start making better decisions. And what I mean, not just the decision, but when I start saying, what is this decision going to cost you? What are you going to lose? How is this going to hold you back? How is this going to hold you down? How is this going to keep you from achieving what you want to achieve? And we brought it to conscious awareness, and I said, now, what do you want? They go, I don't want that. I want this. And I started to realize, I said, man, bringing things to conscious awareness really helps the people make the right decision. So when I'm working with people in the secular community, we call it conscious choice. Because if I go Deuteronomy 30:19, they go, what's that? So I call it the conscious choice strategy. We have them make a conscious choice about what they want. I taught this one time at Royal Caribbean Airlines. They're like, this is a cool strategy, but it was a way of getting them to make the right decision. I'll give you one short story, then I'll show you the other strategy. I did this with a client one time who was not a Christian. He called me. I used to work with him every single morning, help him get motivated, get up, get going. One of the things he wanted to do was to work out. And I'd already did some interviews with him, and I knew some of the difficulties that he faced was being motivated to exercise. He did not want to end up like his dad, who had open heart surgery. He said, I don't want to end up like that. I want to be healthy. I want to be, have a good life, have a great wife one day. I said, okay. So one morning he calls me, he goes, I just don't want to exercise today. And so I had just really discovered this, and I said, let's try this. So I walked him. I said, if you don't exercise, what will it cost you? Because he said, I'm just not feeling it, Dan. I'm just not feeling it. I said, what will it cost you if you don't exercise? And we started talking. He started detailing. I said, he said, yeah, I'm going to end up like my dad. And he said, I can see my dad. I said, when you see your dad, what do you see? I see my dad lying in the hospital, his chest open. He has to have open heart surgery because he didn't take care of himself. I said, is that what you want? Is that what you want? No, that's not what I want. That's not what I want. I said, do you feel that? Is that what you want? No, I don't like it. I said, is that painful? Yeah. I said, okay, set it aside. What do you want instead? I want to work out. And he talked about how he wanted to look, how he wanted to feel, and the person he wanted to be married to, and the wife that he wanted to be with. I said, do you like that? Yeah. Is that a benefit? Yeah. And you enjoy that? Yeah. I said, okay, now bring them both together. See your dad, see all the negative aspects of it, see your new life, working out, you're feeling healthy. Which one do you want? Tell me right now, which one do you want? He said, I'm going to get up and go exercise. That's what I want. I said, great. Is that your choice? Yes. I said, okay, great. He said, I'm getting up right now, Mike. He got up and he got dressed and he went out and exercised. I was gone from home that day. He called a little bit later. Karen picked up the phone. He goes, hey, this is so-and-so. I just want you to let Mike know that I did get up and go exercise, but I know why I didn't feel like exercising. I have the flu. But then he said this, but tell Mike, that's a really powerful strategy because it got me up and out of bed. So use it in a healthy manner. But it's a very powerful strategy to get yourself in the moment, to take action in the direction you want to go. And you can do it over and over to get yourself to stay consistent. Now, for long term, the other strategy is what I call the pondering process. Go over to Proverbs chapter 4. Proverbs chapter 4. That makes sense, by the way, of how to use that? Very powerful. Yes, I'm going to take 5 minutes, so let me know in 5 minutes. If I'm not done in 5 minutes, then we'll just cover it another time. Okay, Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 26 says, ponder the path of your feet, and let all your ways be established. The word ponder here in Hebrew is palas, and it means to weigh or to balance, or to consider something accurately. The pondering process, and actually the pondering process is also, it undergirds both of these strategies. And again, what you want to do, this is more of a long-term change strategy. You think about a direction you want to go in, okay? Something that you want to be a regular part of your life, a behavior, an action, a way of being, a way of living. You can even apply it to thinking, believing. You want to write down all of the pain that it will cost you, all that you will lose by not living this way, by doing the wrong things. Again, but now you're writing it down. And you're writing it down even more specifically. What am I going to lose spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, relationally, financially? You want to imagine all of the negative consequences in all of these areas. Now, this is for helping you to create long-term change. Okay? The first one is for motivation in the moment, as I like to say. So you want to imagine all the negative consequences that you're going to experience 1, 2, 5, 10 years in the future. If I stay on this pathway that I'm currently on, what is it going to cost me a year from now? What is it going to cost me 5 years from now? What is it going to cost me 10 years from now? And imagine the pain of it. Imagine how bad it gets by staying on this current course. You're pondering the path of your feet. Okay? So you're going to look at how it's going to negatively impact me. How will it negatively affect others that I love and care for? I've done this like where my health is concerned. So I think about, do I want to be here and see my two youngest daughters get married one day if they choose to get married? Do I want to see Zozo, my granddaughter, grow up? Do I want to be here for another 30 years to see her grow up and get married? If I don't take care of myself, how will that negatively impact that? So I use it in that way. So you want to see all of the negative 1, 2, 10, 5 years, as far as you want to go into the future, but you want to imagine it vividly. Okay? You want to feel the pain of it. So you got to be willing to feel some pain when you do this. Once you do that, take a deep breath, shake it off, and do the exact opposite. Imagine, identify, and write down all of the benefits and blessings you will get by taking the action you want to take and living the way you want to live. Let's say you want to live, I'll tell you one in a moment. So how will this action bless me spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, relationally, financially? You want to imagine all of that, where it applies. What are all of the pleasures and joys that taking this action that it will bring me? And what are the joys and the benefits and the blessings that it will bring other people? So you want to imagine all of that. And again, cover as many areas as possible that are relevant. And again, you want to imagine and feel the pleasure and the joy of this. And imagine how you're going to be blessed 1, 2, 5, 10 years into the future by living wisely in this area that you've chosen. Okay? What you want to do with this, of course, is to choose the blessing, but you want to repeat this at least 2 to 3 times a week. You want to schedule this in as an exercise you want to do consistently. What you will begin to do is you will start to associate pleasure to the direction you want to go in and pain to not going in that direction, or pain in the opposite that you don't want to go in. You associate pain and pleasure to it. You will literally train your nervous system. And I've done this. I've had clients do this. In closing, let me tell you how I use this. A lot of you know Karen's and my story. First 7 years, difficult in our marriage. People have asked me, they go, well, people have looked at me, they go, you didn't cheat? I went, no. They're like, how did you not cheat? I've had people go like, I don't believe that. Here's what I did. I sat down one day when I first learned this, and I said, what will it cost me if I cheat on Karen? What will I lose spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially? How will it affect other people? And I imagined that vividly if I cheated on her. I went out into the future. I imagined how it would affect Karen. I imagined her crying. I imagined my mom being disappointed. I imagined my friends in ministry being disappointed. And I imagined that vividly. I imagine having to sit down with people and tell them I cheated on Karen. I imagined that vividly. Then, after I did that, and one of the things that really impacted me was imagine Karen crying and say, how could you do this to me? And that just tore me up. Felt the pain of that. Then I set that aside and I said, now what will it benefit me? How will it bless me and others if I stay faithful to her? And I imagined that consistently. And I saw, this is the honest to God's truth. I imagined how it would bless her. I imagined how it would bless others. And this is the truth. I imagine one day sitting before a crowd and telling them this story, that this tool works. And I did that not just once. I did that over and over. And every so often, not because I was tempted, but just to guard my heart, I would sit down and I would do it. After I met Rick, I would include Rick in it. I would imagine having to go and tell Rick I cheated on Karen. And Rick, knowing that he respects me, knowing that he would love me, but being disappointed. I imagine young ministers saying, well, if he can't do it, I guess nobody can live that way. And I felt the pain of that. And I would do this over and over. And what it did, it trained my mind and my emotions, my nervous system, to not even consider cheating on Karen, because cheating was too painful. But staying faithful to Karen and to God was pleasurable. And I get to tell that story over and over today to people in a crowd, just like I imagined almost 35 years ago. This really works. And it's for long-term behavior. You've got to set aside time to do it, though. That's the thing. You got to set aside time. Now, so here's the thing. If you go, I want to set aside time, but I just don't feel like it. Then do the Deuteronomy 30:19 pattern. Sit down and go, if I sit down and do this longer version of it, how will it bless me? And if I don't do it, what will it cost me? And get yourself to do it. That's why I gave you the two. One is for taking action in the short term. Another one is to create long-term direction. It really does work. Learn anything today? Yeah. Amen. This is how we can create, manage, and cultivate our motivation. Facebook, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. I hope you got a lot of it. If you're watching this, leave a comment in the section and let us know how this blessed you. If you're watching this on KICTV, our YouTube channel, leave a comment how this blessed you. We'll be uploading this message by tomorrow. Thank you for joining us. Lord willing, we'll be back, and I'm planning to talk next week on cultivating courage and confidence. Thank you. We'll see you next week.